Hi, Tony here. Most of the videos I've posted so far have been based around instruments for Air Manager. I thought I'd post a video showing a panel. Um, I'd This is a panel that I've been working on for a little while for the C172. It's based on probably or a lot of the instruments certainly are on some of the online instruments from Air Manager, but it's fair to say that every instrument and every control that you see on this panel here has been modified in some way, shape or form, either because it didn't work properly in my eyes, or I wanted to enhance it or change it slightly. So for instance, there's a few little subtle changes like the flags for the DG and the AH are more representative of the X-plane sim, seeing as I'm predominantly an X-plane simmer. You can see little touches like the marks on the AH there, and a few of the other little features that weren't working properly. I've already shown previously the ADF. The CDIs were modified as well ever so slightly to make some improvements. I think the spacing of these dots on this one wasn't quite right, and I've added these little tick marks down the side here that wasn't on the other instrument. A version of the source select switch, a test switch for the annunciators, all working, a park brake, flap control, some dimmers for the lighting, which I haven't incorporated the lighting fully into this panel yet, so perhaps I'll show that in another video when I finally get all the lighting working, but that's the plan. A revised switch panel that looks more like the real switch panel, an alternate static, a fuel panel that pops up to enable you, and I put it in the position where the yoke hole would have been, so it seemed like an obvious place to me. It's not actually it's covering or not in the way of anything there, so you have the full control of the thing, and there's a fuel cut off there as well. You can hide that. There's a circuit breaker panel in here, which is an actual instrument, although it's not really functional yet. These are individual images. Maybe in time I will get maybe some of these CBs going, but pretty much all of it works. And then the radio stack, so the GNS overlays, but with a Garmin, one of my new Garmin audio panels, and some Bendix King, an ADF transponder, and autopilot. But I've also working on some other combinations of different radio units, so I'll be able to make up a few different stacks. I've got an S-Tech autopilot that I'm working on, some different Garmin radios that I'm working on to give some different combinations. So lots of different things, but it's all that's going to take quite a bit of time. So I thought I'd just show this panel, and this is sort of to go along with a concept that I'm working on for a two-panel sim also. The two-panel sim concept is just to show probably this element of the panel here up to the edge of the radio stack and just to the top or to the bottom of the gauges there, but not including the switch panel, because the two-panel concept is that I'm going to mix a couple of touchscreen monitors with some hardware switches and controls. So the hardware switches and controls obviously will be the dimmers and the masters and the ignitions and the light switches, avionics, whatnot, flap switches and other things. And I'm going to try and make that as generic as possible. So I've been sort of poring over several aeroplanes and just trying to think, if I use, because I like to fly lots of different ones, if I try and come up with a set of generic hardware controls, what, if anything, will I be missing? So I'll make sure that I include a switch or I include a control that will do that, even if it becomes redundant in some aircraft and not others, such that I'll be able to still use that. And what that does is it gives me a bit more screen real estate. One, to make the instruments bigger, make them a bit more realistic, because this full size panel on one monitor, 1920 by 1080 or by 1200 monitor, tends to make these instruments a little bit undersized from what they would realistically look like in the real world. These are 3 1/8 inch instruments normally, but if you were to measure these, they're not close to that in this full setup. But they're not. It's not unrealistic. It's just doesn't quite look as good as the 2 monitor setup, which I can show. So this is the sort of the full one panel if I'd end up going down the single monitor route, and this is my sort of take on a more fully featured 172 panel than what you can currently make with the free online instruments, albeit I've done quite a lot of work with these instruments, as I said, to modify them and make them better and work the way I want. And I've also developed some new ones, so you can see the switch panels totally new in terms of the way it's laid out, and the functionality of some of the switches in the coding is different. I've generated a park brake and a flap control that wasn't currently available for the 172. I've added some dimmers in here. I showed you the fuel control earlier. So yeah, lots of features, and the radio stack, of course, has got some fully featured radios of what I've showed in previous videos. So let's just go ahead and quickly fire it up. Let's turn the aeroplane on here, and I'll switch our beacon and our strobe on, I think. Start the engine. You can see the VAC warnings have disappeared now. I'll switch that alternator on there, so we should be charging. Yep. And the avionics can come on. So you can see the overlays are working quite nicely with the GPS units on there, and the rest of the avionics, and things like the flap handle works, and the trim indicator. Just trimming there. The park brake, and I've done some clever little things with the, say for instance on the park brake, like in FSX and in X-Plane, when you click the foot brakes, the park brake comes off. Well, you know, in a lot of the aircraft I've seen, that's not, you know, that's not the way that it really works. If you put the park brake on, you have to take the park brake off separately. Then it's not linked to the foot brakes per se. That tends to be the way it is in the sim. So I've coded the foot brake here to take care of that. So some extra little logic in there that basically it detects that if the park brake was on when the foot brakes are applied, when you release the foot brakes, the park brake goes back on again, and it doesn't inadvertently click it off, so it behaves much more like it does in the real world. Dimmers, as I said, can't demonstrate them too much. I think we've got radio dimmers inner. If we turn that down, we should see those dim down. For some reason, those dimmers are not linked to the same, but these are configurable, so I can change that. But they're linked on I think they're on this dimmer. This one on one of these, or maybe it's the instrument dimmer. Oh yeah, there you go. So I can just change the dim that they're on, so these all dim together. It's a minor thing. Alternate static on and off. I showed the avionics switches. All of the switches here work and are in sync with the sim, as is the key switch and the alternator and battery masters. The clock, what I've shown previously in a previous thing. The test switch for the testing of the enunciators here and there. Yeah, so pretty much source select switch. Pretty much a full featured panel. Quite nice to fly behind on a the single monitor. But as I said, I've got an idea for doing a 2-monitor sim, generic sim, so I can fly quite a lot of different aircraft. So with an idea to have something like this as the left panel, so that's, you can see that's just the main. It's essentially, it's the same panel, but so these are much more realistic in size now. And then I can have a right hand side panel which will contain the radio stack and what other sundry instruments I want, and hopefully I can make that work for sort of turboprops, jets, and twin and single pistons, so I can get a range of different aircraft that I can fly, that I can develop panels for. Obviously it's going to take a little bit of time to do this, but that's the idea. So I think I'm favouring a 2-monitor setup, but I developed the single monitor one anyway that I just showed, just because sometimes that's nice to fly that single monitor one if I'm not say in front of the full sim. Maybe I want to use that somewhere else, or that is also another popular panel. I know a lot of people like to fly or have their instruments on a single monitor, so it's nice to get a few more extra things like the switch panel if you don't have separate hardware and whatnot onto that full-size panel. And that's just my little take on seeing, and as I was sort of investigating and playing around with panels to see what I can achieve when it comes to panels. And that's my little take on some Cessna 172 panels. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you again soon. Bye.